Hello.
Hi. So I'm going to be giving a presentation on medieval Icelandic theater, which is sort of a very speculative thing right now, because not a lot of people know how or why or what or when it happened, but there is evidence that it probably happened. And so I'm going to give some insight into what it might have been like, and I'll go from there. Okay, so this is Iceland. It's a little island northwest of Great Britain, sitting out in the sea, and it's kind of a strange fairy tale land. There's no trees on the whole island because it was made pretty recently in terms of geological time because of a lot of volcanic activity. And so it's this weird sort of barren alien landscape, and it really sets the stage for a lot of the weird stuff that starts to happen there. So I'm going to give you a brief Icelandic history. Between 860 and 874, a number of Viking sort of explorer types were sailing around the North Sea and got blown off course to Iceland. And the first person to settle it was a guy named Ingólfur Arnason, and he made the first permanent settle there in what is near now Reykjavik. And he climbed up to the tallest mountain on the island and saw a big glacier sitting out in the bay, and so he decided to call it Iceland. And then in 930 AD, the Icelandic Commonwealth was established, and that's really important because the reason that a lot of people went to Iceland was to escape sort of religious persecution, as it were, because they wanted to continue practicing their pagan beliefs in the Asur, or the Old Norse gods. And so they went to Iceland to escape the King of Norway, who was systematically killing off all the pagans and Vikings who didn't want to come or stay in Norway like that. And so they all moved out there, but then a future King of Norway followed them there and threatened to take everyone hostage, or take a bunch of hostages and kill them if everyone didn't convert to Christianity. So they complied. However, there was no one there to enforce it. So there's this kind of weird thing that gets set up, because there are some missionaries there who are promoting Christianity, but there's no one to stop them from their pagan rituals. And so a lot of things like Blot, which is ritual sacrifice, and meetings where they would worship the old gods are sort of still going on. But there are also Christian influences, so it becomes this sort of weird blend between the two that creates a very sort of interesting thing. Even today, the population of Iceland, though they identify as Christian, 54% of the population believe in nature beings like elves, fairies, and trolls. And there's 800 accounts of eyewitnesses. 41% of Icelanders report having contact with the dead, whereas European mainland, the average is 25%. So you have this population who's sort of very superstitious, and it's not hard to imagine, because they have, the Old Norse mythology is based out of this stuff called the Edda, which is a big sort of mythological. There's two big parts to it. There's prose Edda and there's a poetic Edda. And it is all the knowledge we have of the Old Norse mythos. But it was written after the stories were being told, because the Christians who came there didn't want these stories being written down. But years later, Icelandic poets and Icelandic writers wrote it down as sort of a record, just so it would stay, like almost a folkloric record, as it were. And so this is where we actually pull the Icelandic theater we're going to be talking about from. So here I have excerpts from two poems. One over here is the Insolence of Loki, and you can sort of see the dramatic emphasis in the writing, because they're written in a sort of direct speech form, and so there's a lot of dialogue and monologues that happen in it, and so all the poems have a clear beginning, middle, and end, and they all tell a story. So here in the Insolence of Loki, this is Loki sort of calling out another one of the gods. So he'll say, "Hush thee, Idun, thou art most mad for men. You have locked your arms in love around your brother's bane of all women." So he's calling around for incest. You know, it's not always happy themes, but there are some comedic themes too. And so they'll have stuff like the Seers' prophecy is sort of a tale of how the earth came to be and how everything came to be. So this Icelandic society was very sort of supportive of ritual theater, which is what we're going to be talking about. This here is a Goði who would lead a meeting of a thing, which is like a part of the Icelandic Commonwealth. A big group of people would go under one of these Goðis, and they'd have these big meetings, even post-Christian times, and they would talk about the old Icelandic gods and stuff, and they would have these big meetings where they decide stuff, and these were biannual meetings. And so there was a lot of rituals that happened here, and we're going to be talking about the ritual theater. So this is where they would meet, in these little places called hops. Now a hop is a farm, and so they would go inside, and there's a well out here, and they're inside. Here's a diagram. You'd have the inside with the walls, and you'd have altars and idols to the gods and god posts, and it's almost a good setup for a theater just because of the way it's set up. So people can sit in the middle, and there's these hedge walls, and it's just a really great place. And when you're in a place like Iceland, you have these dramatic landscapes. It's sort of like the perfect place to just tell stories about the gods, if you know what I mean, because the landscape is so inspirational and alien. So, I'm going to be talking about Thrym now, which is an old Icelandic poem about the Lay of Thrym. I'll give you a basic plot synopsis here. Thor loses his hammer, a giant named Thrym steals it. Thor gets together with his brother and Loki and Freya, who's Odin's wife, and Freya loans Loki a cloak, a feather cloak, and he flies to Jotunheim and talks to Thrym, Jotunheim being the land of the giants, sorry. And, so then he comes back and he says, Thrym has your hammer. What he wants is he wants to marry Freya. And so Freya says, no way in hell am I marrying this giant, because the giant is kind of this troll guy who's not very attractive, and she's also married to Odin. And she says, like, she's like, how lustly and unsightly would I seem if I was seen going to Jotunheim to Thrym. So it's kind of fun. And these characters are very three-dimensional. So Thor and Loki go, and they dress up as Freya and Freya's handmaid, and they disguise themselves, and they go, and here's some lines about this. Thor, before getting dressed up, he says, me would the gods call unmanly, if I let find the bridal veil. So it's already set up for a comedy, because you have like this big manly beefy Thor who wants to like get his hammer back and just beat up everyone who's in his way, but he's kind of trapped by the fact that he has to go through this whole plan. And here, this is Thrym speaking. At the feast, Thor is just eating a bunch of food under the bridal veil. And he's like, who ever saw a bride more keenly bite? Ne'er saw a bride with a broader bite, nor a maiden who drank more mead than this. So Thor's just pounding down the mead and eating all the food. And it's set up for a great sort of comedic ending, where Thor kills everybody. Yeah. So there's already, like, I've talked about, you know, these plays might have been set in these hops, farms, but there's also room for like costume design too, because you have like Loki flying around in his feather cloak and Thor under the bridal veil, and there's just something very dramatic about the whole thing in the way the story would have been told. It could have varied. There might have been a narrator, and there might have been actors, but the way the language is set up is it's very typical like Icelandic farmer speak, and so they are sort of catering to the general population of Iceland, because the literacy rates weren't that high at the time, and so the way these stories would be told was through narration, through performance. And so there's a question here in this sort of story in particular about whether Thor is being depicted in a bad way or a good way, because like one of the things that's so great about it is it is kind of ambiguous. So Christians might be in support of it because like Thor is this kind of big goofy oaf who's losing his hammer, and they're sort of like, you know, these gods, they're dumb. Why do you want to worship them? But then on the other hand, you have sort of the tradition and everything tied up with it. And so it's all very interesting, and I hope to one day do some kind of work like this with you guys, because it'll be a lot of fun. And so that's just a very, very brief sort of introduction to it. And if you have any questions, we can get more into it at some point. But yeah, just got a brief today. So.